Hello, greetings everybody, and welcome here to Wednesday Night Favorites on the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So, I've decided to put together a little bit of a... this may end up being a little bit of a series. It might happen 2 or 3 times, I'm not sure. But so, what it is I've chosen 5 albums that I had heard about or had read about or somebody had talked about that had great hype about them. People were saying they're great albums, they're this, they're fantastic, you'll love this or you'll love that. It kind of, that's kind of phrase people tell you, oh, you got to try this album, it's amazing. A lot of times it's not that amazing, or it doesn't really live up to the hype, or it's not really the style you like, all kinds of different reasons why it never quite makes it to that great hype that you get. But in the case of all 5 of these albums, it exceeded, it lived up to the hype that it was given. And so basically I chose 5 albums that I had basically heard about and people had talked about as being great albums, or I had seen them on other YouTube sites, or somebody I knew had listened to them and said, oh, you gotta listen, this stuff's great. In some cases they were talked about as perennial great albums, and there's quite a few of them, and we know many of them, but very few of them actually live to that grandiose height that they receive. But I picked 5 that I think exceeded it, so that's what we're doing. Now, these aren't in any particular order, so they're not like the best one or the worst one, or any alphabetically or anything. I just put them randomly in the sheet, and I chose them, and then I put them randomly here. So we'll start out with this one from a Canadian artist. It was an album I had heard quite a bit about when I was growing up in school. People talked about it as being great. Oh, you got to hear this album, it's fantastic. And I wasn't really big into this guy initially, and so I didn't think much of him, and so I never really checked this album out until I was out. Until after I started this show. Like, I checked him out. I've been listening to his music for years, but I never got this particular album until I started this channel. And then one day I was out and I saw 2 or 3 of his albums, and I bought all 3 of them. And this one I said, okay, I've heard lots about this album, let's see if it's really as good as people say. And we're talking about Neil Young's Rust Never Sleeps. So to me, this album has exceeded beyond my expectations what people have said about it. I think this is just a fantastic album, and at the time I thought nothing would be better in Neil Young's discography. Nothing could be better than Harvest, or be better than Freedom, or some of those albums. But and this one was with Crazy Horse too, I believe. This is, yep, a Crazy Horse album. So I hadn't had a lot of experience with Neil Young and Crazy Horse. I had heard certain songs, of course, but I didn't think that this album would live up to what it lived up to. So it starts out with, hey, hey, my, rock and roll will never die. Such a classic tune. And this is Out of the Blue, and then it ends with hey, hey, my, into the blue, into the black. So it's basically the same song, it's just one end, they bookend each other here. So great. The Thrasher, this is a song that I never even heard of before, never thought of before, and now it's one of my favorite Neil Young songs. I just love the kind of storytelling that he always does. It's almost ridiculous, some of the stuff he talks about, but such a great song. Definitely one of my favorite Neil Young songs. When I put this album on, I always can't wait for that song to come. So I got to put up with Hey Hey My Hey Hey. The other one's Hey Hey My. But I love this track, so good. Ride My Llama. It's a little bit of a weaker track on the album, but it's not bad. Then you get to Pocahontas, which is Just hilarious, but so good, so catchy. Another song that I can't get enough of. Sail Away, another great track. Powderfinger, Welcome Mothers, Sedan Delivery. Like, it's just like all these songs are so good, and it is such a heavy album too. So for me, Rust Never Sleeps came with a big ticket, meaning that was highly recommended, and then it exceeded the recommendation. So that's my first one. Next up, this is a no-brainer, this one. So I never liked this band because of the first album that I had heard from them. I just kind of dismissed them. I don't want to hear them anymore. That's the way I used to be when I was a teenager. If I didn't like you right off the bat, you were out of there. Didn't matter what you were. Didn't matter how good your other stuff was, you were gone. And then one day at a yard sale, maybe back in the probably in the late 90s when I first moved to Fort Erie, and I was at a yard sale and I saw this album for $1, and I had heard so much about it. People say this is such a legendary album, one of the greatest prog albums of all times, one of the greatest albums of all times. It sold millions and millions of copies, and I thought, yeah, well, let's see if it's as good as people say it is. And I bought it for $1, Dark Side of the Moon. And I have to tell you that the more I listen to this album, the more I realize how absolutely perfect it is. This is maybe, I don't know if it's the greatest prog album of all time. There's some other heavyweights going for that title, but it's right up there. One of the greatest rock albums ever. It just made my masterpiece list this year, if you can believe it. Should have been there a long time, but there's no weak tracks on this album. Yeah, there's so much to listen to. I love the song Time. It's such a fantastic song. That Great Gig in the Sky, I love that one. On the Run, great track as well. Speak to Me and Breathe, which opened the album, really good. Money at one time was my favorite track on this album. I thought it was a great song. Now it's not, to me, it's not even close to some of the others. Us and Them, another fantastic tune. Any Color You Like, Brain Damage, and Eclipse. Like, it just, there isn't a weak track on this whole album, and I just love everything about it. It's such a great headphones album. Just so much emotions, but yet so many far different noises and quirky sounds and catchy guitar riffs and great solemn guitar riffs as well. It just goes on and on. And now this is not the original cover of the album. This is just the one I happen to have, but truly one of the great classic rock albums of all time. Far exceeded even the reputation, and it had a massive reputation, and it exceeded even that. So that's the second one. The third one is an album. When I first decided I was going to do this channel, I thought, you know what, I should go out online and order a bunch of albums I've never heard or have always wanted to own, so I can have something to start with other than just the collection that I had. So I went out and I ordered 2 off of this band because I'd heard so much about this band, and this particular album, people have told me, not only is it fantastic artwork on the cover and the back of the album, and that the album is so prog looking, and then the music is so prog on it, and just told me this is among the best albums by this band you'll ever hear, and it has far exceeded that. And we're talking about Tab in the Ocean from Nectar. That's such a fantastic cover. I love the artwork on this. The 4 tracks on here are all killers. I started out with loving Tab of the Ocean, and then King of Twilight, and then the 2 middle songs, Desolation Valley, Waves, and Crying in the Dark, are so good as well. Like, it just far exceeded even the reputation that I'd been giving from it. And what really surprised me the most is how heavy this album is. This is a heavy rock album. This is the kind of progressive rock that is in the same kind of heaviness as Rush. Maybe not that same style, but definitely that really heavy stuff on here. Fantastic. So I decided to pick this, and also to honor the recent passing of Ronnie Howden, the drummer for this band. So good, like just such. This is a good layout of it as well. I really like it. It also comes with a second disc, this particular one, which is the, so you've got, this was originally released in 1972, I guess in Great Britain, and then was re-released with the US mix in 1976. So you get the US mix, and then you, in addition to that, get a bonus of live stuff from Germany and some live studio stuff as well. So it's really good, far exceeded it. So that's the third one. The next one up, I had heard so much about this band, and of course when you hear about this band, this album is often talked about as being their greatest. And I thought, yeah, okay, whatever. It had 7 tracks on it. Yeah, it's a fantastic cover. I wasn't really big into this band, and I thought, you know what, I'll give it a listen because it's considered their best. Let's see if it's really going to bring me into the Deep Purple fold. Well, not only did it bring me really heavily into the Deep Purple fold, but this is far greater than I could have possibly imagined it to be. I mean, every track on here, Speed King, Bloodsucker, which I absolutely love, Child in Time, one of the great classic rock songs of all time, Flight of the Rat, Into the Fire, Living Wreck, Hard Loving Man. Like, it just doesn't get any better than this album. And I think as great as this build-up was for this album and the picture and everything on it, I think the album itself far exceeds my expectations. So Deep Purple and Rock is actually one of the very first, when I was deciding to do this was one of the first albums that came to mind. Next up, and not the least of which, okay, so this album's a little different than the other 4 because this had huge build-up, and I hated this band. I didn't like them at all. My friend was always pushing them on me. I said, I don't care. That keyboard is just so Bon Teppy, and it sounds so amateurish. I don't want to hear nothing from these guys. I don't like anything about it. It's too kind of psychedelic, and I didn't really like psychedelic music when I was growing up. So for decades, I wouldn't listen to this stuff. And it came with a huge hype, too. Like, people said, this is such a great album. There's like so many big hits on here. And then bang, one day it hit me, and then now I realize just how fantastic this album is by The Doors, their debut. Just everything on here is great. Break On Through, so good. Soul Kitchen, Crystal Ship, 20th Century Fox. 20th Century Fox, yeah. Alabama Song, that Whiskey Bar, so good, so quirky, so fun. Light My Fire, of course. A lot of people find that this is maybe the worst song on the album, even though it's their biggest song on the album, but it's just so good. It so much represents this album. Backdoor, man, I loved it. I Looked at You, End of the Night, Take It As It Comes, The End. Like, this album just far exceeds the billing of it, you know. So it took me a long time to get into the Doors, and then once I got into them, now I can completely say that as much as I didn't like them, this album really far exceeds what the expectations are on it. And I had no expectations on it. People have told me how great it was, and I just dismissed it. But I have to tell you that this really opened the door for me with this band. I know there's people out there that don't really like the Doors, but I've grown to be a Doors fan. So there you have it. Those are the 5 albums I selected that came with big hype and matched it and were even greater than the hype. And so we're talking about the Doors' debut, Deep Purple's In Rock, Nectar's Tab in the Ocean, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, and of course Neil Young and Crazy Horse and Rust Never Sleeps. So those are the 5 I chose for today. I'll probably do another episode of this, but I'll have to pick 5 more. But there's a lot more of these albums than I had originally thought. But I've got 2 or 3 that I'm now listening to that will come with big hype for me, and I've just never got to them and never got into them, but I'm now getting into them, and a couple of them have already begun to exceed that master list for me. So there you go. So you have yourself a good day. Please make your comments. You can comment about what I've said, or you can comment about the albums in general, or anything that you want to say in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe. It's much appreciated. And we will be back next week for favorites. And I'm thinking this will begin my Australian favorites for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be doing a couple of... No, I'm going to be doing a couple of episodes in a row on a couple of Australian themes. So hopefully people will join me for those. So take care and have yourself a good day. Goodbye.